Hey there, everyone. Nick here, and I just wanted to take some time to talk a little bit about now that the league has suspended operations for the time being. This needs to be kind of put in context, I think, to see, where we've come from looking into history here. So, I don't want to get too much into the effects that the virus has had on us so far in terms of diagnoses and deaths and whatnot. But, looking at this 100 years ago, of course, that it was a much different time back then. That was the first time that the league had to cancel the Stanley Cup, or, no champions were crowned that year. So I wanted to kind of put things into context just because it's really, I think it's pretty interesting for one. And number two, it really explains why the league had to do what it did yesterday and why other sporting organizations and, convention organizations, companies, and schools and institutions and whatnot are taking this course of action right now, especially in areas where it's most severe, in parts of Europe, here on the coasts where I am near San Jose. So anyway, looking at 1919, well, the year before that was the end of World War I. And you had millions of troops in close quarters combat with each other in trenches, in abhorrent conditions. And so the flu was spreading more rapidly in that fashion. And then it was discovered, or the first case of what was called the Spanish flu. It didn't have anything to do specifically with Spain, but it was discovered in the U.S. in Kansas, and then it kind of expanded from there, I guess. So this flu made its way to Seattle in September of 1918. Seattle would be the site of the Stanley Cup the following year. And between that winter and that spring as well, an estimated 5,000 people in the Seattle area had died from this flu, and it would make its way into the players' locker rooms as well. The flu overall affected 500,000 people globally, and it killed an estimated, I've seen as low as 5 million people to as many as 50 million people or even more. So that's over a quarter of the world's population that was affected by this. In the US and Canada especially, I noticed that the death rate was particularly high among young adults. And that was because people with stronger immune systems would produce more immune cells, and that would lead to inflammation, which could cause respiratory problems and even pneumonia. So pneumonia was definitely a big influential factor here. And strangely, what I read was that the head surgeon for the US Army had recommended people take as many as 8 grams, or as low as 8 grams to as much as 31 grams of aspirin a day. And pneumonia was one of the common side effects from that, lung damage or effects on respiratory systems there. So there really wasn't a dedicated way to wipe this out. Medical resources were very different compared to what they are right now. And in terms of communication and spreading the word about this sort of thing, that's probably why you saw death tolls as high and that many people infected by it. So, yeah, it's crazy to think that young people would feel the effects of the flu just as bad as, the elderly or infants or toddlers. So imagine, that had the league not responded in the way it did, canceling Game 6 of the Stanley Cup, this could have continued to spread and grow and affect even players who weren't even competing in the Stanley Cup. So I can't imagine something like that now having the effect that it has on professional athletes who are, stuck to these very rigid regimens, nutrition, vitamins and all that. But of course, as we've seen with the current virus, that's even made its way into the NBA. And so that's why the league has to close things down, because even those with the strongest immune systems aren't completely resistant to something like this having an effect on them. So anyway, getting back to my story here, or getting back to 1919. So the Stanley Cup was held in Seattle between the Seattle Metropolitans of the Pacific Coast Hockey Association and the Montreal Canadiens. So back then, only 3 teams in the NHL existed. That would be the Senators and the Maple Leafs, in addition to Montreal. So they played out the majority of the Cup finals back then. They went through the first 5 games. I had seen an article that had cited players reportedly collapsing on the ice after Game 4, which went into double overtime. On the day that it was going to be played, on the day of Game 6, which would have been the deciding game, because both teams had won 2 games apiece and they had tied 1 game. Not even 6 hours before the puck dropped for Game 6, public health officials canceled the game. 10 Montreal Canadiens I'm not sure how many Metropolitans, but 10 Montreal Canadiens were affected by this flu. 5 of them were hospitalized, and even though he was soon after released, Hockey Hall of Famer Joe Hall, who played 18 years in the NHL, died at the age of 38. So he died just 4 days later from pneumonia after coming down with the flu. And then team manager from Montreal, George Kennedy, he would die 2 years later at the age of 39. Again, complications from the flu, reportedly the case there. So you had deaths of millions of people back then. And, so far as I'm making this video, we haven't seen anything near that amount. And that's because, we have more detailed crisis responses. We have medical facilities. We have communication globally that's instant. So, we're very fortunate to be in this time when, we can put together a course of action for something like this. We know that if something bad is happening in one part of the world, that we can prepare ourselves in case that, makes its way over here. And so that's why the league had to do what it did. And I'm glad that, at least for now, that the players are reportedly safe and that the front offices, arena staff, and the fans are, safe as well for the most part. So just a word to the wise, be prepared in case the situation gets worse, because with the way that the virus is still spreading here in the US, I'm not as sure about Canada, but it's good to have some preparations in order just for yourselves personally, and to, take this time just to reach out to your friends and your family members to make sure that everything's okay. I'm sure that for most of you that is the case, and I hope that continues to be the case. But nonetheless, we're all, we have to be responsible for those that we care about and those that we love. And so it's probably important that I continue to spread this message here on YouTube as well. Anyway, I think that's all I wanted to highlight regarding this. As far as how it affects this channel, not so much. I mean, my channel has primarily been based around hockey history and culture and jersey unboxings, not so much like immediate coverage of news, although I have been producing content for that recently. So I'm going to suspend that series on 5 reasons why X team can make the Stanley Cup, because we don't know what the league is going to do. But I want to focus my efforts on producing other contents. So to give you an example, producing a March Madness style rankings for the ugliest hockey jerseys of all time. That's something that has been brewing in my brain for about a year now, because I did that for my favorite jerseys of all time. I want to look at other pieces of hockey history, and in addition to that, focus on the San Jose Sharks, because they still have a lot of decisions to make in the offseason. And I don't think that the virus will necessarily have an impact on, who they want to keep and, retain, versus who could be on the move, versus, draft picks and whatnot. So that, I think, is still certainly to be content for this channel. There have been other topics that have been recommended by you guys regarding, for example, unknown facts about, or 10 facts you might not know about Wayne Gretzky, possibly looking at mascots from the American Hockey League, or ECHL. So I'm sure that there's enough that I can still keep busy with on this channel. So I hope that you're still interested in watching my videos here. And of course, if the season is to resume at some point, then I will be sure to kind of return to form in terms of what I had been producing lately. So anyway, that's going to do it for this video. If you're new to this and you're interested in checking out my other videos, please hit subscribe, and I hope to talk to you guys again soon. Maybe do another hockey hangout or something like that. Anyway, this is Nick with Twisted Wrister Hockey. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you again soon.